What if healing trauma didn't start with words, but with movement, creativity, and connection? In today's episode, we're joined by Varsha Sukhu, a trauma-informed educator and healing facilitator who's transforming the way we support both children and adults through somatic movement, guided visualization, and creative expression. We'll explore how trauma shows up in kids, teens, and even in us as adults, and how we can gently begin to release what no longer serves us. From breaking intergenerational cycles and to simple steps for starting your healing journey, this conversation is filled with deep wisdom, practical tools, and hope for more connected future. How are you, Varsha?
Hi, Siddharth. I'm good, thanks, and you?
Likewise, it's been a while.
It has. It's so nice to see you again. How have the
Yeah,
last few
life
months of the year been going?
that's been good, eh? Just keeping busy, having new interesting people on the pod, and then I remembered I haven't had you on a while, so yeah, and I've also been checking up your stuff on Facebook. It's really like building up, so it's nice.
No, thank you so much. I'm glad you're keeping track of what's happening on my side as well. Thank you. Always enjoy being
You're
back
welcome.
here.
Yeah, likewise. All right, my opening question to you is, what inspired you to create your new program for kids and teens, and how did you integrate elements like somatic movement, guided visualization, and creative writing?
So I've been working with kids for over 10 years. And I've just so happened to get quite a few kids who do deal with anxiety, depression. They have been bullied at school and they struggle quite a bit. And then on a personal level, my child has been through a few issues with bullying. So I've
Oh,
experienced it firsthand as a mom and as somebody who is supporting other kids going through it. And I think for me, it's the heartbreaking pain of seeing these kids who are still so young, not necessarily understanding how to vocalize what they're feeling or fully understand how the situation is impacting them. Um, it's a really difficult thing because there's hormones to include, there are emotional situations, and schooling is very different to when you and I were in school nowadays. There's cyberbullying, there's physical bullying, there's verbal abuse, there's so many different things kids are contending with in this day and age. And it's been something very close to my heart because I've seen so many kids struggle with it and not really overcome it or find the right coping strategies and the right mechanisms that work for them. So, what I've tried to do is create a little something that has a little bit of everything in the different types of learners, in the different ways we share, that's actually going to work and help them create the most impactful solutions with what they're dealing with.
can you walk us through a typical session from your program? What kind of transformation have you witnessed in the kids or teens who go through it?
So I've been working mostly one on one instead of groups. I've wanted to take my time really understanding each child's needs, each child's situations on an individual level. What I do is I look at each child, their personality, the situations they've been through, what their current struggles are. And in the beginning, we try a little bit of everything and we see what is giving them the most help, the most joy, and what they're really feeling works for them. I have quite a few kids who are actually nonverbal. They don't enjoy talking about what they're going through. They don't want to put a voice to certain things, or perhaps they can't actually. So for them, things like creative writing works a lot better. Somatic movement, where they're just releasing things within their body without having to actually verbally say anything. So for now, it's one on one and it's based on each individual and their unique situation and also their personalities, which I feel plays a big part in how we use the different coping mechanisms and strategies with the kids. In terms of the transformations, it's been really amazing to see some of the quieter kids find their voices, and also really amazing to see the confidence, the resilience, the kids who are creating their best life for themselves, the tools they've been given, and see the little wins. It's not always the big victories or the trophies or the medals, but it's the little things of, oh, I made a new friend today, or I was able to go somewhere and have a conversation. I wasn't anxious today. I wasn't afraid. I walked to the classroom by myself. Or I was okay to talk to the girls or the boys that I've had bullying or social conflict or whatever you want to call it with. So those are the small wins that I see as transformational.
All right. How do you define trauma in the context of children and teens, and how does it often show up in their behavior or emotions?
So I learned something very interesting and important when I was studying my trauma sensitive yoga. Trauma is not the actual event, it is how somebody feels about an event. And that is what is really important because everyone may have a different experience of what the same event of what has occurred within the same event. So when it comes to trauma, people also exhibit behaviors or they exhibit patterns in different ways. You might find the more introverted, quieter kids become louder, they throw more tantrums, they're a little bit more passive aggressive. And then you may find the bubbly kids, the ones who are very extroverted and loud, may withdraw into a shell. Some of the behavioral things you can see are massive changes in mood, massive changes in behavior itself, where it's almost like a pendulum swing where it's gone from introversion to extroversion or sharing an opinion to being afraid to say anything in front of people. With kids, I think it's a little bit harder sometimes. Teens tend to have a voice with their parents, they are very vocal about where they are. But kids, in terms of trauma, it can show up in things like nail biting, stomach aches, headaches, lack of sleep, too much sleep. So it's really seeing the physical differences within your child that may not have been there before. And also, I think the generalized fear of school or fear of going to a particular class or break time, those are always big red flags when a child is going through trauma or is still struggling with a traumatic event that has happened.
All right. I have a question for you in the comments. Are you okay if I ask it to you?
Yes, yes, of course.
All right. It's actually there are actually two lines to this question. The first part of it was hi Varsha, thank you for an interesting pod. This is a reality is these times. And then another part of the question was that with so many teens that run away from home, what goes through their minds and what brings them to such a decision, how to deal with such a situation?
Oh, that's an interesting question, and I love it.
Okay.
Teens go through so much more in this generation than they did when we were younger. There is so much more that they are struggling with in terms of access to internet, cyberbullying, um, verbal abuse. And I say abuse because that's exactly what it is. Kids and teens can be very mean. The problem
Mm,
is a lot of these teens feel alone. And when they feel alone, they struggle with their decision making. And I know if teenagers are watching this, they're probably going to be like, no, we know everything. We already have all the answers. But the truth is, in their minds, they do. They think they know the answers. They think they
mm,
already know everything. And if they feel alone and already think they know what the answers are, they tend to use running away as a mechanism of coping. Because if I leave home, it's actually easy. It's easy to go out there in the world, it's easy to get a job. Remember, these teens and kids have access to influences. And I'm not talking about adults, I'm talking about kid influences, teen influences. So for them, it looks like a very easy job that they could do, or other jobs out there are very easy for them to do. When you're dealing with a situation like this, I want to say preemptive mechanisms are better, but no parent is perfect, no child is perfect. Creating that open conversation with your kids is really important. And I'm not saying be friends with your kids. You're not trying to be their best friend. You still want to be a parent, but you want them to know if something is going on in their life, they can come to you and tell you, and you are going to support them. You are going to be there for them. You will love them no matter what. But honesty and communication is key. If you are dealing with a situation where a teen has already run away from home, I really think you need to then look at getting a therapist involved, getting the school involved to understand what exactly this child is going through. Because whilst things can be great on a home front, you can have two beautiful, loving parents, loving siblings, but at school, it could be a completely different story that your kids are not coming home to tell you what they are dealing with or struggling with. Part of it could be shame and embarrassment, part of it can be guilt. And sometimes these kids, because they don't know what these emotions are, they struggle because how do they come back to their parents and say, I feel ashamed of who I am? I am ashamed of something. They don't understand it. So, as parents, as adults in kids' lives, we have to find a way to support them and let them know that they can be honest and communicate with us. And I do feel it is very much a village situation. It takes a village to raise a kid. Find out, if not from your child, from the school, from the teachers. And it doesn't just have to be the homeroom teacher. You're talking about multiple teachers here. What is happening? Are there specific classes your child is withdrawn and quiet, or specific classes they are uncomfortable with? Or are there days they specifically try to miss school? So understand what's happening at school, what's happening at home, what's happening with the friends, what's happening in terms of what they're watching on TV. Unfortunately, as a parent, it's so difficult because you're constantly having to do like this 360-degree analysis of what your kids are dealing with. So there's no easy answer to that question, but it's really just about getting as much information as you can from everyone involved in your child's life, including your child, including your child.
In your experience, what are the common signs of unhealed trauma in adults that often go unnoticed or misinterpreted?
So when kids and teens experience any kind of traumatic event or they experience trauma and they haven't dealt with it, it actually manifests itself into adulthood. And you'll find it's little things like you can get triggered as an adult by somebody's tone, by a phrase,
Oh,
by feeling anxious around going to work itself because maybe you didn't do well at school and you were bullied by other kids, or perhaps you actually just had low self esteem and already struggled with anxiety and you didn't know it. You're taking that same anxiety, those same struggles into your workplace, into your other environments. So, again, it's very similar to kids in the sense that your sleeping patterns change. When you feel anxious, you're going to feel it in the pit of your stomach. You're going to feel it in the sense that something isn't right. Going to work is difficult. Being in a relationship is difficult. And you might not even realize until you've been triggered how something has impacted you until later on in life. I think, look, to be honest, most of us are a lot more aware of our behaviors. We're a lot more aware psychologically, emotionally, even spiritually of ourselves and our personalities, right? And what our impact is in terms of what we do to others and what's happened in our lives versus the older generation or generations before us, because it's not something that was really talked about. I mean, there's still a stigma around mental health. So individuals who are struggling with this when it goes into adulthood still potentially have that stigma around, I don't really feel comfortable talking to a mental health professional about this. But sometimes that's exactly what you need, is you need to have a conversation or find a method to deal with that trauma. So it's not just sitting within you, it's something that you can actually overcome or find coping mechanisms for, especially if you're working in a corporate environment.
how does trauma subtly impact our everyday decisions, relationships, or self-perception without us even realizing it?
So once a traumatic event has happened, and if somebody hasn't really healed from that, it can manifest itself as anxiety, depression, social anxiety, various different forms of issues that we may have. How that impacts our daily decisions are things like if you have the choice of working from home or going into the office. Going into the office might cause you massive anxiety, so you choose to work from home. And as a result, you may not have those social connections with your coworkers. Or you may have social anxiety, and just the idea of going out with people makes you very uncomfortable, or crowds or busy places. So as a result, you make decisions based on your anxiety, based on the traumatic events that have happened. Especially, I want to say, anyone who's been exposed to any kind of violent situations, sometimes just a place can trigger something off, where that is a place they will never go to again. Or a particular, like some people may decide, I'm never drinking again after a particular episode. Although this is great in terms of recognizing what feels dangerous to you and you can identify that, it also means you haven't fully started dealing with it. So it starts to impact the decisions you make. You may have had a bad experience at a restaurant, but you choose, nope, not doing any restaurants in the future. I will only have food at home, or do takeaways, or go visit people at their houses, but I will not go to a restaurant, for example. I mean, it's the same with driving. If you've ever been hijacked or had a smash and grab, it makes you nervous or worried about driving again. But if you are working, you need to drive, you need to go to places. It's almost like something you have to get through. And there's a big difference between being ready to deal with the trauma, and then it starts to positively impact what you're doing day to day because you're working on it, versus, oh, I have to do this, I have to drive, I have to get over everything. That's not overcoming the trauma, but actually it's impacting and forcing you to deal with things you might not be ready to deal with.
What's the role of the body in healing trauma, especially in adults, and why is somatic work so crucial in this process?
So there are various ways to look at this. One of the ways is energetically, right? When trauma happens, it creates an energetic impact. And when I say this, I don't mean like woo woo, flaky energy. I mean, if you think about a room, right? Somebody walks in, they light up a room. That's their energy, that's their personality. The same thing can happen with trauma, where it can impact you negatively and it sits in your body. If you've ever read anything by Louise Hay, she talks a lot about the mind body, emotional body, mental body connection, where what we experience emotionally and mentally physically sits within our body. So if you think about grief, heartache, chest area, and sometimes it's like a band. So it might not even be your chest, it might be your upper back and your shoulders. Maybe you feel like you've got the weight of the world on you, or you're struggling to move forward with certain things, and so you have leg pain. And this is not phantom pain, this is not phantom issues. It's your body physically dealing with the trauma or the traumatic event that you've been through. And sometimes it sits within our body, and using somatic movement helps to release whatever is sitting within our body. Um, I don't know if anyone's ever heard of using dance or movement. There is this wonderful clip that I saw where someone says, if you're angry, dance. If you're happy, dance. If you're sad, dance. But okay, maybe everyone's not a dancer. And don't worry, somatic movement is not just about dancing. It's about using gentle movements to actually release stored trauma in the body. But I'm using dance as an example where it's something a lot of people do. If you're a dancer, you're angry, you're mad, you're happy, you're sad, you dance to embody those emotions. If you think about somatic movement, it's similar in the sense that it helps to release those emotions in a gentler and more specific format.
All right. Do you find that unresolved trauma in adults can unintentionally affect their children or families? How can parents start to break that cycle?
Absolutely. I think there is a lot of misconception around trauma. Trauma is the death of somebody. Trauma is just a serious life event for kids and teens. And remember, growing up, we've all experienced this. When you were teased about something, when somebody said something to you, you'll remember it. If I say to anybody watching this right now, think back to when you were a kid and somebody said something mean to you, immediately there's a voice that goes off in your head because you can remember it. You remember those negative thoughts. Now, this impacts adults raising kids in two ways. One way is that we either go in the complete opposite direction. If we were extroverted or bullied, or, well, not bullied, if we were, oh, what's the word? we were vocal around our opinions. We were vocal
Mm.
around how we felt. And that's just, I mean, I was one of those kids. So you might then swing in one direction where you are telling your kids, listen, be kind, listen to others, give everyone a chance, be patient, which is actually very correct. Except if somebody is being nasty, mean, and it's affecting child's self esteem and anxiety, that's not necessarily the best advice for that child in that situation. But as a parent, based on your experiences, you're trying to give your child the best information and the best advice that you can, which I absolutely agree with. But that's how it impacts how we raise our kids. I mean, if you were quiet and you were introverted and you were bullied, you might then say to your child, you need to speak up, you need to have a voice, you need to stand up for what you believe in. But what might happen is if you've already got an extroverted, bubbly child, that actually leads to them potentially being a lot more vocal around all their beliefs, which again can come across as almost social conflict, where that's not right. This is the way we should be doing it. That's not what my mom said. And again, it's not intentional from the parents. It's based on our experiences, and I do it too, that we then give our kids the information that helps them move forward in life and in school.
Uh, you've, in- you've included creative writing and visualization in your work. How do these practices help someone process or release trauma?
So when we look at visualization, it's not necessarily meditation, but it's about things like visualizing their goals. It's also visualizing what do they want their life to look at school? What do they see for themselves? It's really about visualizing what they want to achieve and going after that. But then on the flip side of that, there is guided visualization, especially for kids who struggle to find a quiet space in their mind. Guided visualizations for short periods of time can really help them focus. And I say this because I had a child who had ADHD, and his goal when he started with me was to be able to sit for 2 minutes and not move. 2 minutes, not run around, not fidget. And that's exactly the goal he got to at month 8. Is he went from just sitting still for 15 seconds because he just couldn't keep his eyes closed to being able to do that. So guided visualization is a mix of both visualizing what they want to achieve and also almost meditation style. In terms of creative writing, I think everyone's heard of journaling. Journaling is obviously a very important part of a healing journey itself. But for kids, journaling can actually be very different and it can be fun and it can be interesting. It doesn't always have to be, dear diary, this is what's happening. We have different methods to journaling that we use, and I use it with each child specifically with what they're dealing with. So, somebody who is currently having anger management issues, for example, they're angry at the world, they're angry with themselves, they're angry at their friends, we give them a very different journaling style of how to release that anger and deal with it in a healthy way, as opposed to someone who is maybe introverted and just quiet and struggling to find their voice, where we use creative writing to help them tap into that creative side of them. So verbally, they might not be able to express themselves, but in a written format, they're able to actually talk through their feelings, their emotions, what they've been through, because it's easier for them.
For someone just starting their healing journey, especially with deep-seated trauma, what's a gentle first step they can take?
Look, the first step with any traumatic healing journey or trauma work is to be gentle with yourself and give yourself permission to listen to yourself. What I mean is, when people start therapy, they start yoga, they start somatic movement, they feel they need to go all in, head first, and just do it. Keep going, keep up the pace. I must do it every week. But if you are having a bad week, it's important to listen to yourself and say, it's okay, self. You're having a bad week. You're having a bad day. You don't have to go to this class today. You don't have to show up for therapy today. You don't have to do something because right now you're not in a space where you are open to receiving. So, listening to your own body, listening to your own mind is important. Obviously, because I do want to say this, if you are dealing with depression, with suicidal thoughts, things like therapy is important. So I'm not saying skip your therapy appointments in all one go. But if you have signed up for a Taibo class, okay, because you want to get rid of certain energy or you just want to be disciplined about stuff, but if you feel week 3, actually, I don't feel like going today, don't push yourself to do something you're not ready for.
Mm,
Be patient, be gentle, because honestly, healing from trauma is not easy. It's not something that is a quick fix. You pull off the band aid, it's all done and dusted. It is very deep, very intricate work that is going to last you for a lifetime. So be slow, be patient, take your time with it. Whether you are 8 years old or 80 years old, give yourself a break.
all right. My final question to you is, what's your vision for the future of trauma-informed support in schools, families, and communities? What changes would you love to see?
So I think from my perspective and based on chatting to various parents, working with kids, and even my own experience, I would want there to be a very specific structure in place in the schools. So kids who have been bullied, kids who are dealing with trauma, and remember, trauma can also be things like parents separating, or a retrenchment where now the house has to be downsized and they're living a different lifestyle. Even though kids may not understand money, they are going through that event with the parents from a different perspective. So for me, having affordable support structures in place, because we also don't want to be paying thousands of rands for stuff, affordable structures that work. And it's something in all the schools that is there to support not all the kids, but the kids who are specifically struggling. It's not an all for one solution. It needs to be unique, it needs to be tailored, and it also needs to have the right people who are driving this in each of the schools. I feel like the schools themselves are not necessarily the problem. Remember, they have their own instructions, they have their own management system, they have so many things that they have to run on their own that they don't always have all of these structures in place. Some schools do, and they are amazing at it, and some don't. They're overwhelmed. And bullying,
Mm.
even kids' anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts, this is something running throughout all the schools, not just here in Joburg, not in South Africa, but around the world. So this is
Mm.
another pandemic for kids and teens that everyone, parents from all over the world, are dealing with.
All right. So all I gotta say that thanks so much for your time, and as usual, check you again in the future.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Darth.
Welcome.